A good TED Talk comes down to attention. Can we hold our audience's attention for the entire duration of the speech? To understand this, we're going to go over some of the best TED Talks, some of the most powerful ones, and one thing that we can take away from each of them so that we can incorporate those ideas into our communication as well. 5 ideas from some fantastic TED Talks. Let's get started. The very first point is ideas that people care about. Ideas is the very foundation of TED. It's the reason why it's in existence. It's the reason why we love watching those videos so much. And this isn't about just one speech. It's about all the great TED Talks. If you see them, they have some sort of unexpectedness in their idea. If you're on YouTube, the best TED Talks, the most viewed ones, have something in their title itself which makes us want to click on them. It holds our attention even before we hear the speaker speak. So how do we do that? It starts by understanding who our audience is. By understanding who we are speaking to, what keeps them up at night, what are their challenges, what are their pain points. We can craft an idea that they'll care about and in turn pay attention to us. And once we find that insight, we make it run across our entire talk. Or as Chris Anderson calls it, this becomes our through line. And everything else, all our facts, our stories, humor, our presentations, everything should support that one message. And that's how the best TED Talks have ideas that make us want to care for them. The next point is having a gripping opening and a strong conclusion. There are multiple examples here of speeches that have opened in a way that, man, you just can't look away, and have ended in a way that it deserves a standing ovation. But for now, with regard to openings, we're just going to look at one of them by Dan Pink.
I need to make a confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret. Something that I'm not particularly proud of. Something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know. But that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal.
Man, you hear that opening and you want to know what is it that he's about to reveal. And that's the main point of an opening, to create curiosity amongst our listeners. If we can create intrigue from the beginning, we hold the audience's attention for way longer than if we lose their attention in those first few peak seconds. And there are many ways we can open our speech that would do that. We could use questions, we can use props, we can dress uniquely, we can make them imagine something, we can start with a story or a shocking fact or a provocative statement. There's so much that we can do, and still so many of us tend to start our presentations with good morning. And the same goes with endings. The end is what the audience will remember. Here's an example by B.J. Miller and the conclusion of his TED Talk.
Now, parts of me died early on, and that's something we can all say one way or another. I got to redesign my life around this fact, and I tell you, it has been a liberation to realize you can always find a shock of beauty or meaning in what life you have left. Like that snowball, lasting for a perfect moment, all the while melting away. If we love such moments ferociously, then maybe we can learn to live well, not in spite of death, but because of it. Let death be what takes us, not lack of imagination.
Again, for endings, we can use questions to make the audience ponder over something. We can have call to actions or challenges that make them actually want to act after the speech is done. We can even use the circle theory, wherein we end the speech on the same line where we began. By the way, we've created 2 really in-depth videos on speech openings and closings with multiple examples and techniques. Both are linked in the description below. Highly recommend you check them out. The next point is personal stories. Here's an example by somebody who did it so well, Chimananda Adichie. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out.
Storytelling is critical. No matter what idea we're trying to convey, if we don't package it in a gripping story, we'll lose most of the audience, or at least most of them will not retain the information we're trying to convey to them. And this particular TED Talk does it extremely well because the speaker uses her personal stories. And the narrative structure she uses is something called nested loops, which basically means that we start with multiple stories, but we don't conclude them till the very end. And that end brings that main idea together. And like that, we can use so many narrative structures. A simpler one is Rags to Riches, or Monomyth, which is the hero's journey, where the protagonist is a hero and there's a villain, and the protagonist has a goal to get to, and what challenges they face to actually fulfill their vision. Storytelling, incredibly important. The fourth point is to use humor. Here's an example by a talk which you've probably seen by Tim Urban.
So in college, I was a government major, which means I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. So, you get started maybe a little slowly, but you get enough done in the first week that with some heavier days later on, everything gets done and things stay civil. And I would want to do that like that. That would be the plan. I would have it all ready to go, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. And that would happen every single paper.
Now this guy seems like a master to use visuals for humor. The way he tells his entire story and the simplicity of his slides makes the entire message so easy to comprehend. It takes the annoying topic of procrastination, which we all can relate with, and it dumbs it down to such a simple level, and he leaves us with a much larger message, which is the main thing about humor, that we can be funny, we can have jokes within our speech, we can upturn expectations, and we can try and get a few chuckles out of the audience. But if we don't have that end message, which really makes them think through the humor, then we really lose out on that first point, which is giving the audience an idea they care about. Nevertheless, humor is a great way to combine education with entertainment, and Tim Urban shows how we can do that. And the last point, which is at the heart of every great speech or presentation, is to create intrigue. Intrigue and curiosity are the main things that hold our attention every time we hear a speaker. And here's an example of a speech called The Surprising Secret of Speaking with Confidence.
3 lessons that I had to learn on the way. Now there's a big lesson in here. The last lesson is the big one. We're going to get there. And it's not what you might think. It's a lesson that might surprise you. But first, would you like to see inside the first drawer? Yes. It's a bit delicate, this, George. So what we have in here is an instrument. Because as you've just been hearing, the voice is the most amazing instrument. It's magnificent.
Now this speaker used props masterfully. By keeping something hidden on stage, it automatically makes us wonder what the hell is under that. And when she starts opening it, each object is so weird in itself, but each of them has a strong relation to the message that she's trying to convey, that it makes the entire speech so much more interesting, as opposed to just saying those messages without having any props. and hence having no or very little intrigue. Now, we don't have to have such a prop setup to create curiosity amongst the audience. We can bring it down to the very basics by doing something as simple as pausing. That's it. Just pausing before our important ideas or before our important messages, things that we want to give emphasis to, creates levels of intrigue with the audience that makes them or continues to engage with them throughout the duration of a presentation. But if we can get some cool props on stage like Caroline Goyder, then we definitely should. And that's about it. 5 things that we can learn from some of these wonderful, wonderful TED Talks to incorporate into our own communication skills. If you have any more questions around things like public speaking, communications, or anything in that space, we have an entire website with in-depth articles and resources dedicated just for that. So go check out franticallyspeaking.com. And if you're somebody who's extremely, extremely nervous about giving their first ever speech or about giving a speech in general, check out this video right here if you're tired of hearing things like be confident and you want some practical examples or suggestions.